Yeah, I was trying to see if my oh, sorry.
I just added Teams meeting information to the other Teams meeting that was scheduled. This is the correct Teams meeting for our project management user group meeting today. Apologies for any confusion that may have occurred. We'll get started in a couple minutes here.
Amy, can you hear my audio?
I can, thank you.
Hi, Claire.
Hello.
Hi, Claire. Give a couple more minutes for folks to join. Okay, we're at time. I'll just give it one more minute for folks to join. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello and good afternoon. On behalf of the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, welcome to our Project Management User Group presentation of the month. My name is Amy Croucher, Chair of the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, and I will be facilitating our meeting today. We'd like to start with a few housekeeping items. As you may have noticed, this meeting is being recorded. Please mute your phone or PC if you're not speaking to help reduce any background noise. If you're not speaking, you are encouraged to remain off camera. A link to the meeting resources will be shared shortly after today's session and posted on the DAS YouTube channel and OPMAB website. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your digital hand and Crossy will respond to them throughout the presentation. The Oregon Project Management Advisory Board has 3 openings for board member positions. For more information and to apply, use the link in the chat. Also, if you're interested in business analyst processes, the Business Analyst Networking Group meets every numbered month. For more information, visit the BANG website posted in the chat. The Oregon Agile Community Practice is also an OPMAB initiative. For information, their website is also posted in the chat. And you're welcome to share with your colleagues and are encouraged to spread the word on our PMUG Wednesday sessions. They can request to be added to the combined PMUG, BANG, and Oregon Agile Community of Practice listservs using the link in the chat. Okay, Claire, would you like to share a little bit about our upcoming OPMAB mentoring program?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Hi, everybody. So we are launching, I think, very exciting new program, the mentoring program. And just as a reminder, a refresher for everybody, mentorship is really a powerful opportunity for growth for both mentors in order to gain fresh perspective, sharpen their leadership skills, and mentees receive guidance and encouragement and access to valuable experience. And that relationship fosters mutual learning and trust, professional development, and that benefits both individuals and our broader community. So we're really excited to be able to offer this very soon. Our plan is to launch our mentor application in February, and it will be available on our OPMAB website. We'll also be spreading the word via all of our different outlets. And our plan is to collect, hopefully build up a mentor pool over a few months, and then launch the mentee application form probably around April. We want to make sure we have critical mass in our mentorship pool before we open it up to mentees, at which point mentees can apply and get matched with mentors, and then they can reach out and request those mentor relationships to begin. So just wanted to make sure everybody's aware. We'll continue to give updates here and on our website and LinkedIn and all the different avenues. But I hope everybody can either engage either as a mentor or mentee, wherever that feels best for you. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Claire. And I will provide an updated link to the Agile Community of Practice. Not sure why that link's not working, but while Crossy is speaking, I'll go ahead and put that in the chat later. So I'm pleased to host this session presented by Krasimir Karamfilov. I apologize, Crossy, I really did practice that. Crossy spends most of his waking hours at the Oregon Health Authority, where he improves processes, manages projects, writes operating procedures, and helps teams in the Equity and Inclusion Division thrive. Prior to joining OHA, he did administrative work at the Art Institute of Portland and spent time, I apologize. And spent time at elementary schools in Portland where he worked with neurodivergent children without having any training or in psychology or child development. Good for you, Crossy. A failed actor and these are his words, not mine. A failed actor and screenwriter, he is a jack of all trades who writes songs, dabbles in security analysis, bakes bread, and tries too hard to be funny. Although he holds a PhD in management and 2 useless master's degrees in arts, he is not an expert in anything. Without further ado, please take it away, Crossy.
Thank you, Amy. There's one comment in the chat about the other BANG meeting that I guess there's some folks still hanging there. Did you see that one?
I did see, I wondered if that was a valid BANG meeting or related to this.
My apologies, that's me, and I meant PMUG. I did
okay.
There was a different Microsoft link, Teams meeting link with the topic for today's agenda, and so that's where I went first. There was about 20 other people with me at that time, but maybe they came over.
I did jump on that meeting before this meeting, but my audio wasn't working, so they didn't hear me when I said I'm placing a link to this Teams meeting in the chat. So hopefully folks have joined who were in that meeting.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Welcome everybody to today's meeting. I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides here. See how that's going to work out. There we go. This is the PowerPoint Live feature of Teams. It's really good. Do you see the screen well? Wonderful.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Crossy.
That's great. The topic of today's presentation is understanding predictive versus non-predictive environments, with a subtitle Navigating Decision-Making in Uncertain Contexts. It's a topic that maybe a lot of you already have a lot of knowledge about and have spent a lot of time thinking about those things throughout your life or through, over the last few years that, society and the world went through with various events that happened. And maybe it's something that you continue thinking all the time, but this topic came to my mind a few months ago and organically kind of emerged, and I decided to kind of dig into it a little bit more and create a resource with this presentation just to continue kind of provoke more thinking, more deliberation, and I think it's a very important topic for people to have top of mind as we navigate this complex world that we live in. Welcome again. We will start, here's the agenda. We will start with the introduction, which this is right now. We'll look at a couple of instructive quotes that kind of will set up the stage for the presentation. We'll look at some definitions about predictive and unpredictable environments and some of the key characteristics of those. Then we'll give some examples of those two environments. We'll talk a little bit about managing different facets of the environment and some implications for policy, for working in state government, for operations, for project management, of course. And we'll wrap it up with some summary and takeaways. So I hope this presentation is a little bit more interactive. I will stop a couple of times throughout the presentation just to open it up for people's questions, musings, comments. I want you to relax and enjoy it. The purpose of this presentation is to really introduce environmental predictability and its impact on decision-making across domains, including project management. So I'm going to give a few examples throughout the presentation, how this topic relates to project management, just to get your thoughts around, and start thinking about that. I think it's very, very useful as project management practitioners for us to really think about those things. Why is it important for us to understand the different types of environments? Well, because whether we like it or not, operations operate in both stable and volatile conditions. And when we understand really the nature of the environment, it helps us really tailor our strategies and course of action. And in state government, working in state government, it's a very specific environment, very, very different than many of the environments outside of state government. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, what that means for us. And how is this topic relevant for strategy, operations, policy, and project management? Well, as we know, very often the environment dictates how strategy is formulated, how operations are conducted, how policy is written, and how project management is performed. And I will give more examples about that as we go along. Now, I want us to look at a couple of quotes that I find both amusing and instructive. First one, you probably know it. It ain't what you don't know that gets into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And that was written and by Mark Twain. Let's think about this for a second. About this, what is Mark Twain trying to tell us in this quote? And you can post some of your thoughts and comments in the chat. How do you interpret this quote? I'll give you a few seconds. I mean, there are many interpretations, but some thoughts that come to my mind is that what we don't know about the future could get us into trouble. Another thing is what we know for sure today is only good if it's verified by what happens in the future. And I see your comments. Yeah, don't assume you're right. Overconfidence can be disastrous. Mm-hmm. Yeah, inaccuracy can get us into trouble. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, the gist of it for me, also another insight is that because we don't know what will happen in the future, what we know today is rarely 100% useful in the future. Living in denial. I love that one. Living in denial. And another insight is, for me, is when we think about the way we think in terms of, modes of thinking, when you think of rationality or thinking or behavior based on reason, right? How that creates a predictive environment, right? Something that, we think that what we know is linear and it creates something that we can predict, and how if we think and behave in ways that are not following reason, that would create a non-predictive environment. And I also want to say one last thing about ignorance is bliss. We use that very often. It's a common expression. But based on what Mark Twain is saying, ignorance is bliss only if what happens in the future does not impact us negatively. Otherwise, yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And the second quote is from Donald Rumsfeld. He was a former US Secretary of Defense who, at a meeting, said this very funny quote that has been often quoted, but I think it's very both amusing and instructive. And it says, there are known knowns. There are things that we know. We also know that there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns. And those are the things we don't know. So we have, as human beings, we have a lot of things we don't know. And the future, as much as we want to construct it and, create a scaffolding and a pathway moving forward, we very often realize that we cannot, we can't do that with 100% certainty. And we'll talk more about that as we move forward in the presentation. Yeah, it is a great tongue twister. Yes, absolutely. Okay, now let's spend a little bit of time to define both environments, the predictive and non-predictive environment. Let's start with the first principle. I mean, environment's really fundamentally neutral. If we removed, human beings from an environment, really we cannot put a qualifier on them. What qualifies them as predictive or non-predictive? Predictive is really the way people interpret the environmental conditions that exist in an environment. In predictive environments, it's a setting, a predictive environment is a setting where the future outcomes can be forecasted with high accuracy due to stable variables in historical data. And the future is mostly known. We'll give examples later on what that looks like across different industries and domains. Non-predictive environment, on the other hand, is a setting characterized by uncertainty, ambiguity, rapid change, where forecasting is unreliable and the future is mostly unknown. And if you look back and, if you reminisce about your life and look back through the years, you will find moments, situations, spans of, time, months, years, where you can pinpoint, okay, this was predictive. I had a sense of, I could forecast what was going to happen, and moments and periods of life where it was like, I had no idea, or minutes. There's no way for me to know how the next thing will happen. And that could be related to your education, that could be related to your family life, to your professional trajectory, could be related to anything. So the key distinction between the two environments is that predictability is about confidence in future outcomes. It's not just availability of data. We can have a lot of data, right, about something. But that doesn't mean that we know how to move forward in a predictable way. Doesn't mean that we're confident moving forward in a direction that we want to move towards. So a lot to think about. Here's some key characteristics between the two environments. And this little table on the left side, the first column is feature. That's a characteristic. Then we have the predictive environment and the non-predictive. When we talk about, data availability, in predictive environments, we typically have a lot of data. We just have a lot of numbers. We have a lot of experience, historic knowledge, and we can using that data, we can say, okay, based on what we know, what the numbers are telling us, we know that X, Y, and Z will happen. That's great. But in non-predictive environments, the data sometimes is not existent, or we have a lot of data, but it's so all over the place that, it's not structured enough for us to really make a determination about the future. In terms of change, in predictive environments, we typically expect really low change or no change. We just want things to just go, the way they are. Flying from Portland to New York City, we know the history that, of a flight is very, very secure, very safe, right? It's very predictive environment. We know that there's not going to be much change. That's why people land in New York City. They're like, how was your flight? Uneventful, which is great because it was very predictable. All right. In non-predictive environments, the change is happening all the time. And we're going to give a couple of examples of that, what happened in the last 5 years and around the world. In terms of complexity, in predictive environments, it's typically low to medium. have high complexity. You don't have a lot of actors. You don't have a lot of variables bouncing around. In non-predictive environment, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of things happening at the same time at different rates, and it's really difficult for the human brain to navigate that. In terms of decision style, in predictive environments, we're more analytical. We're like, oh, okay, we know that there's we can reason, we can use reason to extrapolate what will happen in the future based on experience, data, events. We can read clues. In non-predictive environment, our decision style must be adaptive and intuitive, because there's nothing for our brain to anchor into and to follow a thread. In terms of risk, in predictive environments, typically is 95-5. Skill risk. No, I'm sorry. The risks are mostly known, right? We know pretty much what could happen. In non-predictive environments, we don't know what they are. The risks are unknown and they're unknowable. And that reflects back to the two quotes that we started the presentation with. There are a lot of things that are really, we don't know. What about skills? What about luck? In every situation, in every environment, it's good to think about the skill to luck ratio. It's very, very, very useful way of thinking about things. In predictive environments, it's typically 95-5. And, there's always 5%. If you've studied statistics, you know that there's a confidence coefficient that say, well, with 95%, we're certain that that those results are positive. In predictive environments, 95% is pretty much we know what's going to happen. That skill is, if we lead with skill, we know that things will happen. But in unpredictable environments, it's flipped. It's 5-95. When you go to a casino, when you go to Vegas, it's mostly luck. There's very little skill there involved. And in terms of planning horizon, in predictive environments is mostly, long term, we can really chart our pathway forward. In non-predictive environments we need to keep it short because there's so many things going on. We can't move fast. And the planning horizon is short term and iterative. Let me look at the chat. Anything before we proceed?
One person said, and this is Emily Albers, it reminds me of Steven Pinker's book on common knowledge, when everyone knows what everyone knows. And they say that that's a fascinating scholar and author that talks about this subject.
Yeah, I've read Steven Pinker's books in the past. I've read his book on language. Yeah, he's a great thinker. I think he's out of Harvard University, if I'm not mistaken. Wonderful. All right, let's move forward. Let's just go a little bit deeper into predictive environments. Let's start with some examples across different industries, different domains. In manufacturing. Mostly the processes are very standardized. If you've run a manufacturing business, if you've worked at a manufacturing company, you know that the processes are very standardized, inputs are really controlled, and the outputs are consistent. So once the process is set in place, things are going smoothly, right? It's very predictable. I don't know if you live in Portland, if you've walked on 12th Avenue Southeast, if you walked by the Franz Bakery plant right there, which is very close to PSOB building. And you can look, how the breads are made and how they come out of the conveyor belt. And, you see how the dough comes in, those are that will be the input. And at the end, you see the bread that comes out and is being sliced. Everything is controlled, right? In retail forecasting, it's typically historical sales, data and seasonal trends provide reliable patterns. Any retailer from Amazon to Target and anything you can think of, they do the forecasting on the back end. Weather, short term, yes, meteorologists are really good based on satellite data, atmospheric models, and historical weather patterns. They're really good. Long term, not as much. Finance and stable markets, and bear markets over the last 10, 15 years, as we've noticed, based on historical returns, volatility, and some correlations, you can use that, to really estimate, and create risk models and portfolio optimization. That's doable, when things are going well. And traffic, if any of you uses public transportation, I'm noticing in my commute on the bus, I can really say based on the day, once we hit certain spots, I pretty much know how the traffic will go. So traffic patterns follow very consistent daily and weekly rhythms. Energy demand forecasting. Energy usage, follows predictable patterns based on time of day, season, and weather. Nobody expects at 2 o'clock in the morning, everybody, all the lights to be up and, people be cooking and stuff. So the energy companies, they're forecasting that. They know how the energy demand is flowing. At hospitals, hospital resource planning, patient admission rates and treatment durations can be forecasted using historical data. Insurance risk assessments, actuarial models, they use large data sets to estimate risk probabilities for everything from how long we're going to live, whether we're going to hit our car, or just anything, any probabilities that we would like to insure. On the back end, there's a lot of number crunching happening in predictive models. And finally, in project management, when we design when we start a project, we write the charter, and we list the deliverables. The deliverables are known. This is what, those 5, 10, 12 deliverables, we know what they are. We know our budget. Here's a schedule. We put the schedule together. We pretty much know it. Here's our start date. Here's our end date. We know our team. Here's the business lead. Here's the project sponsor. Here's the technical lead, so on and so forth. So we have a lot of known elements in project management, which is great. Wonderful, right? Okay. Those are some of the examples. Let's see about decision making. In predictive settings, decision making is analytical. I already mentioned it, logical and deterministic. We think that we know the path. We know that we can reason our way forward. Actors have most or all information, and we can act on it. Cause and effect is expected. We know what follows. We expect A to lead to B, leads to C. And events proceed in linear fashion. That gives us a lot of security in life, stability, which is great. It's wonderful. We love creating predictive environments in life, safety. It's good for the human mind, lowers stress. There's so many benefits of predictive environments. It's wonderful. The approach is, data-driven, model-based. We can model things, we can predict things, we can optimize. It's optimization focused. In terms of tools, we can use forecasting models, we can use simulations, we can use key performance indicators, KPIs, and other tools such as, if you've studied statistics, regression analysis we can do. We can use machine learning. We can use simulations like Monte Carlo simulation. And if you don't know what the Monte Carlo simulation is, it's a simulation. It's a mathematical model that basically spits out different future scenarios. Just pretty much, it can go forever. and it's Monte Carlo. It's a famous casino in Monaco in Europe, and the mathematician who came up with those simulations, actually, his uncle used to gamble at that casino, so that's why he called that Monte Carlo simulations. So that's a fun fact for you. An example of a predictive environment, we talked a little bit about inventory. So inventory management using demand forecasting, very standard. What are the benefits of predictive environments? There's a lot of efficiency, which is wonderful. We all love efficiency. Cost control. We can really see where every penny goes. We can minimize risk, which is wonderful. It's scalable. We can, think how we can expand the capability, the capacity. And it's good for solo work. Solo work is great. Once you know where you're going, there's so many things, so many environments that people alone can just do the work and move forward and achieve things, which is great because the environment is predicted. Okay, I'll pause right here. Any thoughts, comments on predictive environments? What comes to mind when you think about predictive environments? Any examples of predictive environments in your life? All right.
There's a comment in the chat.
The 8 a.m. start time for work. That's very predictable. Yes. 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 Excellent. All right, let's move forward. Yeah. Yeah, the kid asking for a cookie after dinner. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And when they're older, they're, very, very predictable. They will ask for money. Not after dinner, but, depending, on the environment. Easy to collect data and analyze. Absolutely. Yep. Everybody operating as expected. Yeah. Systems of common consent. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so great. We love it. We love it. It's fun. And a lot of us get into state government and get a job. Yes, we want to serve, the people of Oregon. Yes, all that good stuff. Yes, we are really good-natured people. We want to help. That's we're generous, we're altruistic, wonderful, awesome. Yeah, and the stability of it plays a small part. They're like it's stable. There's the union. There's PERS in the future. There's some predictability there that we enjoy. So here we are. All right, let's talk a little bit about non-predictive environments. All right, non-predictive environments. Here are some examples of non-predictive environments. Startups. If you've ever started a company, you know that it's hell. You know that it's just all over the place. If you want to even become bigger, think of any company, any startup in the last 50 years that you know of. Their market needs, their customer behavior you have to think about. You have to think about product market fit. All these things are unknown and constantly evolving. You have no idea what's happening. I have a quick story. My mother-in-law, 25 years ago, in the 90s, when Amazon became a public company, somebody told her to invest in that company. There was only a bookstore back in the day, but it was a startup. I mean, it's been around for a couple of years, right? A lot of, unpredictability in the future. And she did not invest in Amazon. And, part of her reasoning was like, I don't know. I mean, it's so, there's so many companies coming on board every day. It's like, how is Amazon any different? Nobody knew back in the 90s. So there you go. Because of that, she made a prudent choice. But, why? Because it was just too much, too much unpredictability in the future. All right, public health emergencies. In the last 5 years, we were part of COVID, right? We experienced, a pandemic, and we learned how it emerges with very limited data and unpredictable spread. Nobody knew. Nobody knew at the beginning of COVID how big it was going to get, how many people were going to die. Nobody had no idea. Nobody knew how to operate in that environment. But we learned. We're adaptable human beings, so we learned that that's an example how in public health emergencies, very often we have very little to no knowledge how to move forward. Geopolitical conflicts. In geopolitical conflicts, there are a lot of complex interdependencies, human behavior, and sudden escalations. Many examples over the last 10, 20 years. Any war you can think of that's happening, any conflict around the world, there's a lot of complexity. It's all these, think of Ukraine, think of Gaza, think of Sudan, think of, any big conflict area. It's a non-predictive environment. Technological disruption. New technologies can rapidly change industry, often in unexpected ways. Think of AI. Think of the internet. Think of so many things in the last 30 years, technologically. Think of cell phones in our hands. It's, again, nobody knows the beginning, which way it's going to go. It's changing really rapidly. Natural disasters, earthquakes, wildfires, tsunamis can occur with no warning. Cascadia earthquake, we don't know when it's going to come. Could be tomorrow, could be in the next hour. We don't know. Social movements and protests. They're driven by very complex social dynamics, emotions, and tipping points. We've experienced many social movements over the last 50, 60 years. Again, very unpredictable. Innovation and research and development. Any company you can think of that is involved in research and development, the outcomes are very uncertain. Cures for cancer, cures for various diseases, explorations in space. No, it's just, they don't know. It's educated guess how things will happen. So, the breakthroughs are often very serendipitous. And the final example I have is cybersecurity threats. If it's, when you have a threat, everything is evolving really rapidly. The threats and the actors are very adaptive and hidden and unknown. Okay, well, what does that mean for decision making? How can we cope with that? With so much unpredictability. Well, human beings are adaptive beings. We have adaptability on our side, so we can really switch from one way of thinking and behavior to another. So non-predictive environments really demand adaptability. Otherwise, we can't survive without. When you think about the history of humanity, without humans adapting to the conditions and the environments that came our way, the chance of us getting to 2025 right now is zero without adaptation. Actors often act without full information and adjust as new information emerges. The link between cause and effect is absent. A leads to Z, leads to rabbits. Why it leads to rabbits, we don't know, but that's where it's headed. And all of a sudden we have rabbits. Yeah, and we have to make sense of it, right? And events occur in a non-linear fashion. The best approach we can take is moving forward. Let's experiment. Let's try different things. Let's iterate. Let's be creative. Let's learn as we go along. That's really the best approach in those environments. In terms of tools, we can think about scenarios. We can plan scenario planning. Red teaming. For those of you who don't know what red teaming is when OIS, the Office of Information Services, red teaming could be one team is the blue team, one team is the red team. The red team is basically it's a game, right? The red team basically is the hackers, the attackers, right? And the blue team basically defends the enterprise. So red teaming is a great approach to really see, okay, what could happen, right? But in a very safe environment. Agile frameworks are very, very good tools to use. And of course, design thinking, thinking ways to structure environments so that they start making sense, and how we can design and what variables we can use and what tools and workflows and supply chains and so on and so forth. So design thinking, very useful in non-predictive environments. An example, for example, it's a crisis response teams adjusting to new information. So we will experience that. I mean, if any of you have been part of the COOP, the continuity of operations in state government, I'm the COOP coordinator in the Equity and Inclusion Division in OHA. That's what we're training. We're talking, we have meetings, how to respond in a crisis as a team, right? Where do we start and how do we move forward? Again, there's going to be a lot of new information if something bad happens, where to go, but it's a team. It's not a solo thing, right? And the benefits, flexibility, resilience, innovation, and teamwork. In unpredictable environments, being alone, trying to figure it out on your own, very, very difficult, almost impossible. You always need a team around you to have your back, to really, the collective thinking to move everybody forward. All right, I'll stop here. Open it for comments about non-predictive environments. If you can think in your life, any thoughts, comments about non-predictive environments? What emotions non-predictive environments evoke in you? Are they scary? Do they produce anxiety? Do they keep you up at night? Yeah, what are some of the things when you think
All
about
of the above.
all of the above?
Yeah. Andy in the chat has systems thinking can help with non-predictive environments.
Absolutely.
Can you speak on that a little bit? The what a systems mindset could do to help in a non-predictive environment a little bit?
I
Not to put you on the
could
spot.
maybe put a link in the chat. Really what it does is it allows us to sort of adapt more flexible thinking and not we tend to see linear systems as being very simple, and we sort of gloss over the complexities of a thing, right? And so with systems thinking, we're not only looking at the parts of a thing, we're looking at how those parts interrelate. We're looking at how the system itself is interacting with its environment. And so we're just not overlooking the complexities of a situation when we use system thinking. And there's a lot of different approaches for systems thinking. I hope what I put in the chat helps. Thank you.
I think that's fantastic, Andy. And it also highlights the fact that if you're thinking in a systems mindset, you're less likely to make assumptions because there's a higher degree of understanding of how things actually happen. When if you're in a non-predictive environment, that can be critical.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all. These are great comments. There's a comment. Which environment do you believe is more durable, predictive and unpredictive? How can both be? Durable. You have to define durable. Durability is also about resilience, which has a lot to do with scale and inertia. Okay. Hillary, did you want to talk a little bit about durability?
Yeah, on a more statewide scale, is it more durable? Because sometimes we're having issues is that our policies aren't durable to withstand administration shifts, legislative shifts, funding shifts. And so we have to be pretty nimble. And so a lot of the systems we have are complex, but they try to do this non-predictive way so we can be consistent, whether it's with state employees or the Oregonians or others we serve. So I guess I'm just asking this question in general, like in your experience, what do you feel has been more durable to withstand over time the state system to be able to be effective in most and leverage leverage the resources in the most beneficial but widest impact way?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Durability, it's an interesting concept, right? That it's a great segue to the next section of the presentation, where we talk about managing environments and what are some of the optimal ways in which we can navigate and manage environments that will increase durability long term. Let me go over those slides and see if the information on them kind of answers that question. Now, we often find themselves, very rarely do we proceed from one environment, from one predictive environment to the next predictive environment to the next predictive environment. What happens in life is that we constantly move from one to the other. We constantly transition in between environments. In one environment, everything could be very safe and predictable, and we can forecast outcomes. And then as soon as we step out that room or that city or that apartment or that office or whatever it is, things may shift. And, it's a continuum, right? One end you have predictability. As we move, less predictable, less it's neutral, and then more unpredictable, and completely unpredictable. So, every environment is somewhere between those two extremes. But let's talk a little bit about when predictive fails. Predictability fails, oops, let me go back. Predictability fails when, for example, when black swan events happen. If you don't know what black swan events are, those are low probability, high impact events. There was a great book written 15 or so years ago by Nassim Taleb, philosopher and former trader on Wall Street. It's called the Black Swan. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best books on unpredictable environment and behavior and thinking. I'll put a link in the chat. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. Black Swan, and to be exposed to those topics is really, really helpful. I find it very, very stimulating. Predictability fails when we try to overfit, when we have model overfitting. That has been happening over the last few years with machine learning models. With AI, where we see that machine learning model starts to learn its own training data that it's learned on. Like, think about the big models out there that are, ChatGPT, Claude, all that. They're trained on a lot of data, but they're trained only on the data. So if all of a sudden an input of data comes in that they have not expected, they're not trained on, they don't know what to do. And there have been tests done with AI machine learning models and comparisons been done, how they react to that. And we see that certain AI models fail. They're not very good because they're trained only on the training data. And that's more about this will come in the next probably few years as AI continues to develop. When there's crisis, right, predictability fails. We're driving, for example, down the road, everything looks good, and all of a sudden somebody comes from the left and T-bones our car, and all of a sudden it's crisis. The car is overturned and people are screaming, and it becomes really chaotic. There's no predictability anymore. We don't know what's going to happen next. When there's disruption, technological disruption, social disruption, public health disruption, any disruption that you can think of, predictability fails. Some of the signals for unpredictability is volatile inputs. What that means is that we don't know, we don't know exactly what signals are coming our way that we can predict, right? One example that I, I, I thought of recently is when my daughter was very little, right? You know, especially when children are small toddlers, we don't know what's going to come at us as parents. You know, all the signals all day, we don't know. We try to read them. And they're like, oh, are you hungry? No. Is your diaper full? No. I mean, what is it? I mean, it's, you know, new parents struggle with that because the inputs are very volatile. We don't know what's happening. There's no consistency to that. So as a parent, I've experienced that. Uh, Also, another signal for unpredictability is when we have a lot of experts, but they all give us conflicting opinions, right? We saw that during COVID. All these different opinions, you know, from different experts, all the, you know, just came from Washington, came locally, came from everywhere. It's like, we don't know. We don't know, you know, who really has authority, who has knowledge. We have no idea because they're all, you know, some of them, a lot of them were conflicting. I was part of the COVID response and recovery unit during the pandemic at OHA. So I saw a lot of that. Strategy. What would be a good strategy to have when we transition between environments? Well, hybrid systems. Hybrid systems are really robust. And in terms of when we talk about durability, hybrid systems, really, they combine both data and human judgment. Because there are a lot of things, as we know, that data is great and we can rely on data to inform decisions. But at the end of the day, right, it's good to have a human in the end and say, okay, so here's the decision that you know, based on the data. Yet we actually can decide something very different, and we use our human judgment. So strategy built on a hybrid systems really provides, I think, the best durability long term. So if we talk about, you know, there's a slide later on, I'll talk a little bit about our uncertain environment in state government. I will speed it up because that's 3:54. All right, implications for policy, operations, and project management. Policy, when writing policy, the policy must be adaptable, must be evidence-based, of course. It must be iterative. That means that nothing is set in stone, right? For now, it works. Tomorrow, when things change, when the environment changes, we should be ready to rewrite the policy and make it iterative. Here are the new conditions. Here's the policy. Here's the new version. In operations, we have a need for contingency planning. We have a need for cross-functional teams, right? We don't want to put only project managers, right, in one team, and only project managers, for example, think about a project. No, we want project manager, want a change manager, want operations person, we want a technical expert, we want, right, all these different, you know, teams and functions, capabilities in it. We want to build systems that are both efficient and resilient. That's super important. Efficiency is great, and I think we overemphasize efficiency in state government, but resiliency is also really, really good. In project management specifically, somebody mentioned assumptions during a project. Think through those project assumptions and ensure that that list is exhaustive. Because assumptions are what? Assumptions are things that we believe are true before we begin a project. Make sure that you really think through those assumptions. They're clear to you, right? Because if you're wrong on some of them, that will come back later on in the project. Also, emphasize risk planning when building the integrated project plan, and monitor the risks very closely during the execution of the project. Some projects are very small. There's like one risk, two risks. On bigger projects, right, that involves a bigger team with a lot of variables moving at the same time, the risks start piling up. So think about this. And in terms of leadership, leaders should really encourage a culture of learning and experimentation. There's very little of that in state government. Very little, in my experience. And I've been in state government only 7 years, but learning is great. Yeah, we have a lot of learning. We're learning things that, again, tried and true. We're learning tried and true things. Experimentation, not as much, in my experience. Okay, here we go. Some implications for employees in state government. The current state, just one example. Current state is very challenging and an unpredictable fiscal environment, as we know, impacting all state agencies. Programmatic cuts are expected in 2026. Some state employees may lose their jobs due to deprioritized programs and activities to save money. That is happening across agencies. If you're not aware of it, that's what's happening. How do we prepare for that? Well, it's good to expect the unknown and the unexpected, and to believe that things will show up. Unexpected things will show up. So planning is crucial. We really need to have plan B and plan C. A lot of people already lost their jobs. We saw what happened with the ODOT. We know what happened to federal employees. So it's good to have some planning. In terms of safety adjustment, I talked a little bit about how stable our jobs are in state government. Well, I think it would be very beneficial and helpful to us not to think of our state jobs as stable and secure until retirement. I think it's better to view our jobs as a springboard for something better, even if we want to stay in state government for the rest of our lives. Because things may change. Funding may change, federal government funding may change, other things may change. So that safety mindset, not very helpful. In terms of internal work, I call it ego work. I think it's helpful not to think about our jobs as too important to be eliminated. We are all replaceable. And AI, as we know, it's coming our way really fast. It will enter state government in a few years. It's going to be slow. Probably state government. The government will be the last place where AI will enter in a big way. But jobs will be replaced by AI. It's coming. In terms of control, I think it's beneficial for us to focus on what we have control over. A lot of things we do not control. So having a mindset that, hey, I can control the things that I can control my learning, I can control my skill development, I can expand my professional network, meet more people to create more opportunities for myself. Those are things we can control. Everything else, not much control there. And yet, at the end of the day, there's always a silver lining. That's why I put it at the very bottom. Silver lining, always, it's good to have a mindset to look for the silver linings and to accumulate the lessons as we move through non-predictive environments. Yeah, and at the end of the day, at the end of our lives, when we look back, we could have led really turbulent, really eventful lives with a lot of unpredictability, but that enriches us. We learn lessons as we go along. And yeah, we may look back fondly and say, you know what? Yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of unpredictability, but I made some great people. I learned so much. It was fun. I enjoyed it at the same time. Anyway, it's 4:00. So here are a few summary and takeaways and a couple of questions for the group, and we wrap it up. Predictive environments. As we said, they favor data, models, planning, good planning, and efficiency. Efficiency rules. In unpredictable environments, it requires adaptability, creativity, and a lot of resilience to survive in unpredictable environments. And as a key insight, I've included that the best leaders, teams, and organizations can operate effectively in both environments. Right? Somebody really good in a stable environment, in a predictive environment, neglecting skills for non-predictive environments, they do disservice for themselves, for their career, for their development as a human being, because the world has both. Okay, a couple of questions for the group before we wrap it up. How does your organization handle unpredictability? When you think about it, the agency you're a part of, how do they deal with it? And you don't have to answer it now. I mean, think about it for yourself. You can add things in the chat if you would like. And what tools have you found most useful in uncertain environments that have helped you or your team navigate those environments? Those are good things to think about. Yeah, risk management, Eric is saying, risk management and planning for the unexpected. Absolutely. Absolutely. Very important. So think about this, as things are impacting your agencies, your teams, your co-workers, think about that. It's coming out of left field. We don't know. Could be just the beginning of something bigger that we don't know about. Teamwork is important, Laurie says. Yeah. Having an input from different perspectives and lived experiences provides greater possible options, solutions. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we're all swimming in it. It's part of our lives. And I'm so grateful that it's all of us together. We all one team, all state employees, even though we're across different agencies, all project managers, we're all working on projects that benefit the work in our state. Planning. Yeah, Leo says planning more flexibility into our projects and setting expectations for possible upcoming change requests. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining this meeting. Thank you for the great comments in the chat. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Crossy. Excellent presentation. So much information to think about and process, that's for sure. We really appreciate it. I was going to put the links in again that I put in earlier. 1 second here, and then we'll all begin the closing comments here. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Crossy, for presenting. I've posted a link to, I will post a link to a short survey in the chat, as well as the link to join the PMUG, OPM, BANG, and Agile Community Practice listservs. I've posted a link to a survey in the chat that will help us improve future PMUG experiences and to nominate yourself or a colleague as a future speaker. You can look for a follow-up email with links to resources from me. Please share with your team members and those who may not be on the listserv to reach out to in the link provided. And if you're interested in learning more about business analyst processes or the Oregon Agile Community of Practice, visit the websites posted in the chat and enjoy the rest of your week. Have happy holidays, everyone, and we'll convene again in January. Thank you so much.